And so after you sent in your application, at that time, were you aware of any maybe red flags in your whole CV or application that you felt, okay, this is something I'm gonna have to talk uh, to the program director about when I go for an interview. Were you aware of anything
Yeah,
like that?
because of my step one, I passed all my steps on my first attempt, but all of them, they are below the average. There are 220, both of them. So because of that, I knew that people were going to ask about my step ones. And that was actually one of the questions that I wasn't, it took me a while actually to know how to deal with this question. I was trying to get all the research I could. I was trying to read on the internet what people use, but I couldn't find like anything. So at the end, I decided to just say the truth. I took all my steps in less than 1 month. The system was different. It was another language, and I was doing a lot of stuff. Uh, and now what I decided is like when you are doing this, if you do have one red flag, just try to address it and then try to say that what you learned from them and how you are improving yourself. That's what I learned. So for example, yes, my step one is actually not as competitive as a 260, but I improved my 2CS and I did higher performance in all the areas. So this is how I'm getting used to the system. And now my step three, I haven't taken it yet, but I started studying it already and I'm getting good score. So that's how I kind of address it. And trust me, there were like a lot of people in my interviews who asked me about my step scores. And they weren't like polite about it. They were like, why are step one so bad? Like that.
Oh, wow,
Yeah.
amazing. All right, and so now, Dr. Dada, you had anything to add?
I absolutely think that being realistic about your red flags is very important. If you're someone who's going to be caught off guard when they ask you about something that it's an obvious red flag, you're definitely not prepared for that interview. So I feel that this is what we work with our candidates with. Um, you, like, I'll say it again, you have very good mentors that probably prepared you for these interviews. But if you don't have the luxury of that, come to us and be honest about yourself. And sometimes that honesty pays off. Like you said, you can just tell them exactly why. This is what you did. And of course, it helps in your application to have passed everything in the first try and not have an attempt. That you were doing so much, you published, and everything worked out for you. I'm so very glad for that, But for the people that it's not the case, you have to be honest with the dash of, I don't know, realisticness, and this is something only someone that is trained to see that is going to help you with.
So, so Dr. Chavez, another question. Now, if you went for an interview, and I'm going to say if you were not asked about it, did you make it a point to kind of explain to them why your step one score was not where you wanted it to be, or did you just wait for them to ask you that question?
Actually, I was always afraid of that. And actually, one of my friends who were shift told me that at the end, when people end up interview, they always gather and ask you about what do you think about this applicant. And if you don't address a red flag, it will come out. And if you didn't explain it during interview, then people will wonder like what happened. What because probably the person who was interviewing didn't ask you about it, right? They didn't tell you like why is this red flag on this application. But probably someone else will wonder, even though your interviewer didn't ask you. So it will come up. So if the person who interviewed you doesn't have an answer to that, that might put you down on the rank list. So always try to address, and I try to address it, even though people weren't asking me about it. I try to address it as possible.
Wow.
I have a question about that. How did you address it even if they weren't asking you about it? I'm very curious.
Yeah, like one of my interviews, one of the people asked me like what was the toughest thing that I ever encountered in my life, and then I said like not matching, and then I told myself that something I learned from not matching was that how passionate, how dedicated I was to do medicine and how to do internal medicine. And then what I was telling him that I have faced different challenges in this path, like trying to improve my step one, trying to improve my 2CK, my 2CS, and that's when I address it. Like in that moment, I said like I have faced this, I have faced these problems, but now this is the way I'm addressing it, and this is how I improve them.
Interesting. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think, and the reason why I asked is I think that's a very I'm going to say intelligent strategy, because it kind of tells me as an interviewer that you've kind of done a little bit of self-reflection. You kind of reflected upon your shortcomings and why it happened, and how you kind of did better the next time. Like you worked on your step 2 CK and everything, and your research, and try to build up your application that way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's great. Now tell me about okay. So you applied, you got your interviews. I hear that scheduling the interviews was kind of a nightmare. The last this residency application cycle. I mean, people would get like emails like, I don't know, at midnight or like early AM. Is that what you experienced too?
Well, actually, I was very lucky, and I got like 3 interviews in one set, so I was able to place them almost together. However, for some interviews, I was already traveling when I got them. So what I did was I had to change my plane tickets in order to get to the interview, because the dates were a little bit close, and it was a little bit messy. But at the end, I think it worked out. It's a very expensive time.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah.
Now, did you, among the interview offers that you got, how did you like line them up? Did you, start off with ones where you thought, I'm going to try these programs, and then you interviewed at the places where you really, really wanted to go, and then had some as backup?
Okay. I actually, every time that I got an interview, I was so excited that I always put myself into mind that was the only interview that I got. And I had to do my best on that interview. So I never lined it up and saying like, this is my favorite program, this is least favorite program. I just put them together in a more convenient fashion of, okay, this is close to this area, so I might be there when I'm traveling, so I might put it on this date. But every interview that I have, I was very grateful. I think not matching gives you that sense of it. And I was like, okay, I was thinking on my mind, like, this is the only interview that I got for this season, and I'm going to try to do my best on it.
All right. Now that brings us to the next topic that, I and Dr. Data kind of focus a lot about, is preparing for the residency interview. So how did you prepare for that?
Okay. First of all, I kind of practice with some of my American friends. I have a very good friend that she's very, she did language, and she's very good at putting things into context and into words in a very fashionable way. So she helped me through. We did some mock interviews. I also did some mock interviews with 2 or 3 of, I could call them mentors, because they helped me through this path as well. People from Madison. So I also had like feedback from them. And they were very good feedback about it, because when you're in an interview, you kind of get lost and nervous and you block everything. So it's good to know how to answer to difficult questions and everything. So I did mock interviews. I also read some books, like Getting into Residency, or different books that you can get online for free. So I read some of those when I was at the airport. And I also try to grab the best ideas from every, feedback that everybody gave me, and try to put it into words. There are like some general questions that they always ask you in interviews. So I have like a draft of these questions with my own history or my own words or everything. So I try to rehearse that from time to time.
And the close friend of yours that you said, who helped you out. So I'm assuming she was a resident when you did this preparations. So someone who went through the process. That's what I was getting at.
Correct. Okay. Yeah, she's a surgery resident, so she went through the process as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of like what, Dr. Data talks a lot about, is that don't do mock interview with your friends or, folks who have kind of don't know about this whole interview process. Is that right, Dr. Data?
Correct.
I feel like there's a great support community out there for IMGs and FMGs, but unfortunately when you are practicing with somebody else that is in the same shoes as you, but not at the level that we are, whether it's in a training program or attending status, that you are kind of just memorizing answers that are not going to help you during the process. You have to practice with somebody who's been there or is in a program or on the other side or has been on both sides of the table, that I always like to say is going to give you the best feedback.
Absolutely. All right. Anything, Dr. Chavez, about the residency interview? Any unusual questions? Any questions that threw you off guard that you would like to share?
I think the most challenging questions that we always find out are the ethical questions. That when they put you like case scenario, like what would you do? Because sometimes it can be very subjective to person. I find those very challenging sometimes, but again, just go with your logic and whoever you are. At the end, they're going to take you for what you are, so just try to be yourself. I think that's the best advice that I can give to people. Try to address red flags because they ask you about it, and they don't ask you politely. They ask you like very, in a very sometimes rough way. But it was very interesting. And like that person who asked me like, why is your SIP score not 260 like that? I actually, at the beginning, I always wondered, like I was afraid if someone would ask me that question. And when I answered him, he actually, at the end of my interview, he hugged me and he told me like, congratulations, you have gone so far. You should be proud of yourself. So I think at the end, he actually liked my answer. So at the end, it's just like not be intimidated, whatever the word, whatever the question is.
Mm-hmm.
Let me think about anything else. I think it's just like the red flags and just like the ethical. And then they just ask you the general questions about why you want to go into internal medicine. And they review your CV and sometimes ask you about details like what have you been doing or whatever.
Absolutely. And so again, you're just trying to say that, just keep practicing and get feedback and try improving, and that really builds up your confidence when an applicant goes for the residency interview.
Correct.